Good morning. My name is Evan Clement. I plan on attending George Washington University.
Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Joanna Van Sleck, and I plan on attending New York University.
Good morning. My name is Raven Gonzalez, and I plan on attending New Albany.
So we are here for Unit 2, How Did the Framers Create the Constitution? Anti-Federalists believed in classical republicanism, the idea that representative government dedicated to the common good could only work in small communities with similar interests. Do you agree or disagree with this statement, and why? In addition, how did the Federalists respond to anti-Federalist objections to the proposed Constitution? And also, why did the Anti-Federalists object to the supremacy and necessary and proper clauses of the Constitution? Explain your position on this issue. Maybe.
We disagree that representative government dedicated to the common good could only work in small communities with similar interests because the United States has local governments in small communities as well as a federal government that governs the nation as a whole. The United States utilizes federalism to have a large, representative, centralized government, state governments, as well as small, localized governments so that people have a voice not only in their local and state communities, but on a national level as well. Federalism in the United States, which is the distribution of power among different levels of government, gives the people representation locally as well as nationally, ensuring that their interests are represented in a smaller community and on a national level. The 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution grants the states and the people any rights not expressly granted to the federal government, so the allocation of powers to the different levels of government is explicit. Local government is the closest to the people, concerned with the common good of the individuals on a smaller scale, mainly community quality of life issues like education, trash pickup, and road maintenance. Local government is the best representation of popular sovereignty because it is the most accessible to the people, allowing for better representation than the national government, as elected officials represent a smaller number of people in local governments. In Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville extolled the virtues in New England townships, where the government emanates from the governed because they have so much opportunity to participate.
The Federalists responded to the Anti-Federalists with well-articulated arguments detailing why the Articles of Confederation were failing and how the proposed Constitution remedies its weaknesses. These arguments were cogently stated in the Federalist Papers. Some of the main concerns from the Anti-Federalists were the necessary and proper and supremacy clauses. As written in Anti-Federalist paper Brutus I, the effect of these provisions would be that the Constitution and laws of every state are nullified and declared void. They were afraid that these clauses would give the federal government too much power. Madison defends this by asserting that it is a basic characteristic of government to have the authority that these clauses provide. Anti-Federalists were also fearful that natural rights, the individual rights that governments were instituted to secure, would not be protected, and so they insisted on including a Bill of Rights. Alexander Hamilton, however, argued in Federalist 84 that a Bill of Rights is not only unnecessary in the proposed Constitution, but would even be dangerous, meaning that it would imply that the people did not have rights that were not specifically enumerated in the Constitution. He argued that the Constitution provided many rights, like the right of habeas corpus, the right to trial by jury, and barring of ex post facto laws. As Madison put it in Federalist 51, hence a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments would control each other at the same time that each would be controlled by itself.
Anti-Federalists were fearful of the necessary and proper clause and the supremacy clause because they believed it would lead to the elimination of state courts. They believed that human nature causes those who have the power to try to increase it, so the central government will keep growing until all state authority is eliminated. The supremacy clause is essential because, without it, it would lead to power disputes between federal and state government, which will lack any solution. An example of this is the Supreme Court case Missouri v. Holland. Congress enacted a treaty with Great Britain to protect migratory birds, calling it the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Missouri challenged this act. However, the court held that Congress had the constitutional authority to ratify it. The Supremacy Clause renders treaties as the supreme law of the land. The necessary and proper clause is also essential because it allows Congress to carry out its enumerated powers as well as its implied powers as the country evolves. An early example of this is created by McCulloch v. Maryland, where Maryland had tried to tax a national bank created by Congress. The court ruled that the national bank had a constitutional right to establish its branches within any state because of the necessary and proper clause. Congress has a duty not just to adhere to treaties as the law of the land, but to pass laws that would be effectively executed. Without the necessary and proper clause, it would be powerless to do so.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. What criticisms of the Constitution by the Anti-Federalists seem less valid, and why?
I would argue that the criticism that the necessary and proper clause would allow the national government to become too powerful was less valid, because all it does is allow Congress to use its enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. More broadly, it doesn't grant them any new powers.
I would have to disagree with my colleague. I believe that the belief that the judiciary branch would lead to the elimination of state courts was not very valid, since there's the concept of federalism, which is the division of powers between federal and state level. So the states would have the power to decide on issues that involve their police powers.
I would have to disagree with both my colleagues, and I believe that the notion that the Constitution needed a Bill of Rights was invalid, because, like Hamilton said, there already were rights included in the Constitution.
What about today? Are there anti-federalists today? What are their fears? What are the fears of anti-federalists today? And are their fears justified? If so, why?
I think the fears of anti-federalists today is that the federal government will have too much power over the states. I think that it is justified because not all rights are guaranteed to the states, like unusual punishment and excessive bails and fines is not established to the states yet. So I do think that some of their fears are legitimate.
I would agree with my colleague. Through selective incorporation of the Bill of Rights through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, federal power over the states has increased because they force the states to recognize certain rights that the state constitutions do not recognize.
I agree with my teammates. I believe that there are still anti-federalists today believing that the federal government is too powerful, especially when it concerns the Second Amendment, where people have the right to bear arms. It's still a highly contested issue today with organizations like the NRA stopping legislation and school shootings today.
Additionally, there have been instances such as the Trump administration suing the state of California for trying to restrict the federal government's ability to sell state lands, even though the federal government has that power in the resolution that formed California as a state of the union.
I guess, let me go back to my question was, what criticisms seem valid? On the other hand, what criticisms seem I'm trying to balance the two questions. Which criticisms seem the most valid?
I think the criticism that the executive would become too powerful. The executive powers are very broad, and the Anti-Federalists had a fear that the monarchy in England would become like the one in the States, and I feel that the power that the executive has now, that the Anti-Federalists would not be okay with.
In disagreement with my colleague earlier, I think a Bill of Rights was necessary in order to protect natural rights that are given to us when we're born. I believe that without a Bill of Rights, the Anti-Federalists would never have been able to ratify the Constitution.
If you had to go back in history at that time, do you think you would be more leaning towards being a federalist or an anti-federalist?
I believe that I would lean more towards federalism, mostly because the Articles of Confederation were failing and the economy was failing, and I believe that the national government, federal government, would have needed more power in order to save the nation.
Honestly, I think I would be an anti-federalist, because coming from England with such high power bestowed to the king, I would be afraid of an executive with that much power and the federal government having too much power. So I think that the anti-federalist beliefs in that would coincide with mine.
To agree with my colleague earlier, I believe that would be a federalist. The fear that the what was the? Can you restate the question, please?
Just basically, if you had to go back in history, would you think you would fall on the side of being an anti-federalist or a federalist?
I would fall on the side of being a federalist. The failures under the Articles of Confederation, such as the failure to tax, really hurt the United States economy, and without a new constitution, it was likely that the country would fail. The amount of debt that the country had from the war was unable to be repaid under the requisition system of the Articles of Confederation, because the states had no way of being forced to pay for those war debts.
No,
Also,
I'm sorry.
also, there was local insurrections already in the country, like Shays' Rebellion, and the states weren't raising militias in order to protect us, so I believe the national government was needed.
Your arguments are for a strong central government. But what about the states' rights? What are they giving up? Wouldn't that be a problem for you?
I believe that the states weren't capable of handling the situations that were facing the nation at the time. There was no uniform currency. Each state producing its own currency led to inflation in several states. So the idea that taking those states' rights away was actually beneficial for the states and didn't actually harm any of the states' rights that were benefiting the states ultimately.
I disagree. I think that the states' rights were very important, and that without giving the states specific rights and enumerating them, then we would be lost of those rights, and the government could just take too much control over the states.
Okay, well, so we have time for that.
Okay, all right, perfect, perfect way. Okay, so we'll introduce ourselves and we'll give you some feedback on your presentation. So first, I wish you give yourselves a round of applause. And thank you to the teachers for your support and hard work, as well as parents if you're in the audience today. They also deserve a round of applause. Congratulate you on your future aspirations with college. I have two sons who are in college and one who just graduated, so good luck to your parents for the application process as well as you, and long road ahead. My name is Marissa Moran. I'm a professor of law at New York City College of Technology. So I want to begin by saying that your prepared presentation was great. I like that you were very natural in your presentation. I know sometimes with a group of three, it's a lot more information to have to work together on rather than a bigger panel, but you flowed well together and you were able to address and hit all of the points I asked. I do know it was the prepared part, but you did mention case law, you mentioned quotes, and it seemed very natural in your presentation. And as I said, you were spot on with all of the issues. So that was great in terms of your presentation. With the ad lib or with the off-the-cuff questions that we asked afterwards, again, there was no hesitation. You jumped right in. You were able to agree and disagree, which is what we like to see as well, and what you should do. I think your perspective and with my question about, which might have been a tough question in terms of anti-federalist, federalist, place yourself back in time, but your responses were good because what you actually did do was say, based on the information I had available at that time and based on my knowledge of the arguments that were being said, and you showed how difficult it is then as well as now because you came to a three-way split at some point where you agree with things and didn't agree with other things. So, and then that's the basis of our government. So you really, in terms of your responses and application of your information, you hit everything. So thank you very much. It was a great presentation and good luck.
Bert, I spend most of my time now in arbitration mediation with you. Years behind me as an attorney. First, I wanted to say I agree with my colleague has said. I have sort of an extensive background in constitutional law, and not as an attorney, but as an educator, and the whole revolutionary period. So I can really appreciate the work that you people did. And your answers indicated to me knowledge of the subject and ambition and knowledge to be able to speak about it and explain and express yourself. So I was very much impressed by that. So I want to thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Well done. My name is Mark Sherman. I used to be a prosecutor here in New York City, currently a civil litigator, and I appear in front of judges very often. So it's good to be on the receiving side for a change. Because I know, even with all that experience to this day, I still feel the same way you must, which is, the butterflies, the anxiety, the sweaty palms. I need to take a towel with me to court still, and I feel like throwing up usually. The important thing is not to choke, and you did a very good job of that. Your delivery was very articulate and fluent, and I especially appreciated the balanced points of view. The fact that you weren't necessarily such a unified panel with one focused point of view. I like the way you painted the picture of life and society back in the day when the Constitution was drafted. How there was, on the one hand, this loose association of states that could easily have just crumbled into, a bunch of independent, warring, tribal factions. Indeed, eventually did in the Civil War. At the same time, painted a picture of, so in that regard, the states obviously needed a strong central government to keep it tied together. On the other hand, you also described former colonies who were tired of domination by a central power in England. So I appreciate the balance. I support the position very well.
Thank you.
Try to have fun with it. I know it's hard. Good luck.